Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Are we there yet? Tom whined from the back seat. His mother, Linda, turned around with a forced smile. Almost, sweetie. Just a little bit longer. John Anderson gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. He'd uprooted his family from their comfortable suburban life for this new job opportunity in the remote town of Pine Ridge. The promise of a better future had been too tempting to resist, but now as they climbed higher into the wilderness, doubt gnawed at him. The SUV rounded a bend, and suddenly the town came into view. Nestled in a valley between towering peaks, Pine Ridge looked like something out of a postcard. Quaint wooden buildings lined the main street, their windows glowing warmly against the approaching dusk.
Well, here we are,
John announced, trying to inject some enthusiasm into his voice.
Our new home.
They pulled up to a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of town. It was nothing fancy, but it had a certain rustic charm. As they piled out of the car, stretching their cramped limbs, a chill wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the scent of snow and secrets. Linda shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. It's different, isn't it? John nodded, wrapping an arm around her waist.
It'll take some getting used to, but I think we're going to be happy here.
If only they knew what lay ahead. The first few weeks in Pine Ridge passed in a blur of unpacking, settling in, and getting to know their new neighbors. The townspeople were friendly enough, if a bit reserved. There was an undercurrent of wariness in their interactions, as if they were holding something back. It was during a town meeting in the local community center that the Andersons first heard whispers of the virus. Mayor Collins, a portly man with an impressive mustache, stood at the podium, his face grave.
Now I know there's been some talk going around about this so-called mystery illness, he began, his voice echoing in the packed room. I want to assure everyone that the situation is under control. We've had a handful of cases, yes, but nothing to cause alarm. A murmur rippled through the crowd. John leaned over to Linda, whispering, Did you know about this? She shook her head, her eyes wide with concern. Mayor Collins continued, The symptoms are unusual, I'll grant you that, but our medical team is working around the clock to understand and treat this condition. In the meantime, I urge everyone to stay calm and go about their daily lives. As they filed out of the meeting, John overheard snippets of conversation. Turned his hair blue overnight. Swears she can see in the dark now. Grew an extra finger, can you believe it? He shook his head, trying to make sense of it all. It sounded like something out of a science fiction novel, not real life. That night, as they lay in bed, Linda turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. John, what if it's not safe here? Maybe we should think about leaving. He sighed, pulling her close. Let's not jump to conclusions. It's probably just some strange flu. We'll be fine. But even as he said the words, a seed of doubt took root in his mind. Days turned into weeks, and life in Pine Ridge settled into a strange new normal. The virus, whatever it was, seemed content to lurk at the edges of their awareness. There were occasional reports of new cases, each with its own bizarre set of symptoms, but nothing that disrupted the daily rhythms of the town. It wasn't until Bennett Miller fell ill that the true nature of the virus revealed itself. Bennett was their next-door neighbor, a burly man in his 40s with a booming laugh and a penchant for early morning woodworking. One day, the familiar sound of his chainsaw was conspicuously absent. Linda, ever the good neighbor, decided to check on him. She returned from his house with a troubled expression. He's sick, she told John. Really sick. He was burning up with fever, and his skin, it looked almost translucent. John frowned. Should we call the doctor? Linda shook her head. He says he already did. They're sending someone over later today. For the next few days, an eerie silence fell over the Miller house. Occasionally, they'd see a figure in a hazmat suit entering or leaving, but Bennett himself remained out of sight. It was nearly a week later when they heard a knock at their door.
John opened it to find a woman he didn't recognize standing on their porch. She was striking, with long auburn hair and piercing green eyes that seemed to glow in the fading light. "Can I help you?" John asked, confused. The woman's lips quirked in a sad smile. "John, it's me. Bennett." John stumbled back, his mind reeling. This couldn't be possible. Bennett was a man, a big, bearded man. But as he looked closer, he could see familiar features in this woman's face. The strong jawline, the slight crook in the nose from an old boxing injury. "Bennett?" he whispered, incredulous. She nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as if for protection. "I know it's hard to believe. Hell, I can barely believe it myself. But it's true. The virus, it changed me." Linda appeared behind John, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. "Oh my God," she breathed. Bennett, or was it Bennett now? Looked down at her feet, clearly uncomfortable. I didn't know where else to go. Everyone's been avoiding me since I got sick. I just needed to talk to someone." John stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in," he said, his voice hoarse. "I think we all need a drink for this conversation." As they sat around the kitchen table, Bennett, who now asked to be called Ariel, told her story. The fever had come on suddenly, followed by excruciating pain that seemed to radiate from every cell in her body. For days, she'd drifted in and out of consciousness, her body twisting and reshaping itself. "When I finally came to," Ariel said, her voice soft and unfamiliar, "I looked in the mirror and this is what I saw." She gestured at herself, a mix of wonder and fear in her eyes. Linda reached out, placing a comforting hand on Ariel's arm. "I can't imagine what you're going through. But you're not alone, okay?" Ariel nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything's different. My body, my voice, even the way I think and feel. It's like I'm me, but also someone entirely new." John leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Have the doctors said anything? Is this permanent?" Ariel shrugged, a gesture that looked strange on her new frame. "They don't know. They've never seen anything like this before. Some of the other cases resulted in physical changes, but nothing this drastic. They're calling it extreme gender reassignment, for lack of a better term." The conversation stretched late into the night as they grappled with the implications of Ariel's transformation. By the time she left, the Andersons felt as if their world had shifted on its axis. The virus was real, and its effects were more profound than they could have imagined. In the days that followed, word of Ariel's transformation spread through Pine Ridge like wildfire. Some reacted with fear and suspicion, crossing the street to avoid her. Others approached with morbid curiosity, peppering her with invasive questions. Through it all, the Andersons stood by her side. They invited her over for dinner, helped her shop for new clothes, and acted as a buffer between her and the more hostile elements of the town. It was during one of these dinner visits that Ariel first discovered her new abilities. They were sitting around the table, enjoying Linda's homemade lasagna, when Tom accidentally knocked over his glass of water. Before anyone could react, Ariel's hand shot out impossibly fast. She caught the glass in midair, not a drop spilled. A stunned silence fell over the table. How did you do that?" John asked, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. Ariel stared at her hand in wonder. "I don't know, I just reacted. It was like everything slowed down for a moment." From that point on, Ariel began to discover more changes beyond the physical. Her reflexes were off the charts, and she found she could process information at an astounding rate. Colors seemed more vivid, scents more potent. It was as if the virus had enhanced every aspect of her being. But with these new abilities came new challenges. Ariel struggled to control her enhanced senses, often becoming overwhelmed in crowded places. She had to relearn how to interact with the world around her, adjusting to her new strength and speed. Through it all, she grappled with questions of identity. Who was she now? Was she still the same person inside? Or had the virus changed her very essence? One night, unable to sleep, Ariel found herself wandering the quiet streets of Pine Ridge. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the empty sidewalks. As she walked, she became aware of a presence behind her. Turning, she saw a figure emerge from the darkness. It was Mrs. Abernathy, the elderly widow who lived at the end of their street. But something was off. Mrs. Abernathy's usual shuffle had been replaced by a predatory stalking, and her eyes glowed an unnatural yellow in the moonlight. "Well, well," Mrs. Abernathy crooned, her voice carrying an otherworldly resonance. "If it isn't our little changeling, how are you enjoying your new form, dearie?" Ariel took a step back, her enhanced senses screaming danger. "Mrs. Abernathy, are you feeling all right?" The old woman cackled, the sound sending shivers down Ariel's spine. "Oh, I'm feeling better than I have in years. The virus, it's a gift, you know. It shows us who we truly are." With shocking speed, Mrs. Abernathy lunged forward, her fingers elongating into razor-sharp claws. Ariel reacted on instinct, her body moving faster than thought. She dodged the attack, rolling to the side and coming up in a defensive stance. "What are you doing?" Ariel cried, her heart pounding. Mrs. Abernathy grinned, revealing rows of pointed teeth. "Embracing my true nature, dear, as should you. We're the next step in evolution, you and I, the future of humanity." What followed was a surreal battle through the darkened streets of Pine Ridge. Ariel found herself tapping into abilities she didn't know she possessed, superhuman strength, agility, and even a strange energy that crackled at her fingertips. As they fought, Ariel realized that Mrs. Abernathy wasn't trying to kill her. This was a test, a twisted initiation into whatever the virus was creating. Finally, exhausted and battered, they came to a standstill in the town square. Mrs. Abernathy, looking no worse for wear despite the fierce combat, smiled at Ariel with something akin to pride. "You've done well, child," she said, her form shimmering and returning to that of the harmless old woman Ariel had always known. "Remember this night. It's only the beginning." With that cryptic message, Mrs. Abernathy turned and walked away, leaving Ariel alone with her thoughts and the dawning realization that the virus was far more than a simple illness. It was changing the very fabric of their reality. As the sun rose over Pine Ridge, casting long shadows across the town square, Ariel made her way back home. Her mind raced with the implications of what had transpired. The virus wasn't just changing people physically, it was awakening something within them, something powerful and potentially dangerous. She arrived at her house, pausing for a moment to stare at the familiar facade. It felt like a lifetime ago that she had been Bennett, the burly woodworker who lived a simple, contented life. Now she was something else entirely, a being of untapped potential and unknown purpose. With a heavy sigh, Ariel pushed open the door and stepped inside. She needed to tell someone about what had happened, needed to make sense of it all. But who would believe her? The Andersons had been supportive, but this was beyond anything they had encountered so far. As if summoned by her thoughts, there was a knock at the door. Ariel opened it to find Linda standing there, a look of concern etched on her face. "Ariel, are you okay? We heard some commotion last night, and then when I saw the state of the town square this morning..." Linda trailed off, taking in Ariel's disheveled appearance and the faint bruises that were already fading from her skin. Ariel hesitated for a moment before stepping back and gesturing for Linda to come in. "I think we need to talk," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of revelation. Over the next hour, Ariel recounted the events of the previous night. Linda listened with wide eyes, her expression a mix of disbelief and growing alarm. "So you're saying that Mrs. Abernathy, sweet old Mrs. Abernathy who bakes cookies for the neighborhood kids, turned into some kind of monster?" Linda asked, her voice shaky. Ariel nodded, running a hand through her hair. "I know how it sounds, but I swear it's true. And it's not just her. I think the virus is changing all of us who've been infected, giving us abilities, but also awakening something darker. Linda was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Finally, she reached out and took Ariel's hand. "I believe you," she said softly. "After everything that's happened, how can I not? The question is, what do we do now?" It was a question that would haunt them in the days to come. As they began to pay closer attention, they noticed subtle changes in other townspeople who had been infected. Mr. Johnson, the high school science teacher, seemed to have developed an uncanny ability to predict the weather. Little Susie Parker could now communicate with animals. And old man Gus down at the bait shop, well, people swore they saw him walking on water at the lake. But for every benign or wondrous change, there were whispers of darker transformations. Pets going missing, strange noises in the woods at night, a palpable tension that seemed to hang in the air as if the town itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Ariel found herself at the center of it all. Her dramatic transformation had made her a lightning rod for both fear and hope. Some saw her as a freak, a cautionary tale of what the virus could do. Others looked to her for guidance, sensing that she might hold the key to understanding their new reality. As the days passed, Ariel struggled to come to terms with her new identity and abilities. She spent hours in the forest surrounding Pine Ridge, pushing the limits of what she could do. She discovered she could run faster than should be humanly possible, lift objects many times her body weight, and even manipulate the energy that crackled beneath her skin. But with these newfound powers came a gnawing fear. What was she becoming? And more importantly, what was happening to Pine Ridge? The answer came on a crisp autumn evening as the town gathered for its annual harvest festival. The atmosphere was tense, with many residents eyeing each other warily, wondering who might be the next to change. Ariel stood at the edge of the crowd, feeling like an outsider in the town she'd called home for so long. She was about to turn and leave when a hush fell over the gathering. Mayor Collins had taken the stage, his face grave.
"My friends,"
he began, his voice carrying across the square.
"I know these past few months have been challenging. The virus that has swept through our town has brought changes we could never have imagined. Some of you have gained incredible abilities. Others have undergone physical transformations. And yes, some of you have struggled with darker urges." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ariel felt a chill run down her spine. "But I stand before you today to tell you that this is not a curse," the mayor continued, his voice growing stronger. "It is an opportunity for Pine Ridge to become something extraordinary." With those words, Mayor Collins began to change. His body shimmered and grew, transforming before their eyes into a being of pure light. Gasps of awe and fear echoed through the square. "We are the next step in human evolution," the mayor's voice boomed, now carrying an otherworldly resonance. "Pine Ridge will be the crucible in which a new future is forged. Those of you who have been changed, step forward. Embrace your new selves, and those of you who have not, your time will come." Ariel watched in a mix of wonder and horror as people began to step forward. Some transformed on the spot, growing wings, changing colors, taking on aspects of animals or elements. Others simply stood taller, a new light of understanding in their eyes. In that moment, Ariel realized that Pine Ridge would never be the same. The sleepy mountain town was becoming ground zero for a transformation that would reshape humanity. And she, with her unique perspective of having undergone one of the most dramatic changes, would be at the forefront of it all. As the crowd erupted into a cacophony of excitement, fear, and confusion, Ariel felt a hand slip into hers. She turned to see John and Linda standing beside her, their faces a mix of emotions. "Whatever happens," John said, his voice steady, "we're in this together." Linda nodded, squeezing Ariel's hand. "You're family now, and family sticks together no matter what." Ariel felt a lump form in her throat. She had lost so much, her old identity, her sense of normalcy, but she had gained something precious too. A new family, a new purpose,
and a chance to help shape the future of not just Pine Ridge, but perhaps the world. As the sun set over the mountains, casting the town in a warm, golden glow, Ariel took a deep breath. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, what new changes the virus might bring. But for the first time since her transformation, she felt a sense of hope. Pine Ridge was changing, evolving into something beyond human understanding. And Ariel, once Bennett, now stood at the threshold of this new world, ready to embrace whatever came next. The journey ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But as she looked around at the faces of her neighbors, some familiar, some transformed beyond recognition, she knew that they would face it together. The virus had brought change, yes, but it had also brought unity. In this isolated mountain town, a new chapter in human history was being written, and Ariel, with her newfound family by her side, was ready to help pen its pages. As night fell over Pine Ridge, the town buzzed with a new energy. The Harvest Festival had become a celebration of transformation, with those who had changed proudly displaying their new abilities and forms. Ariel watched as children laughed in delight at Mr. Peterson, the postman, who was now able to change the color of his skin at will. Nearby, Mrs. Gonzalez, who had developed the ability to control plants, was creating intricate floral sculptures with a wave of her hand. But amidst the wonder, Ariel could sense an undercurrent of fear. Not everyone had been changed by the virus, and those who remained unaffected watched the proceedings with a mix of awe and trepidation. She overheard snippets of worried conversations. What if it happens to me next? Are we even human anymore? What if the military finds out about this? That last question sent a chill down Ariel's spine. She hadn't considered the wider implications of what was happening in Pine Ridge. If word got out about the virus and its effects, what would the outside world do? Would they see it as a miracle or a threat? As if sensing her unease, John appeared at her side.
"Penny, for your thoughts?"
he asked, handing her a steaming cup of cider. Ariel took a sip, letting the warm, spicy liquid soothe her nerves. I'm worried, John. This is all happening so fast. What if we're not ready for what comes next? John nodded, his eyes scanning the crowd.
"I know. It's a lot to take in. But look around you, Ariel. Despite everything, people are coming together. We're adapting. That's what humans do best." She smiled, grateful for his steady presence. "You're right. I just can't shake the feeling that this is only the beginning."
As the night wore on, Ariel found herself drawn into conversations with other changed individuals. They shared stories of their transformations, compared abilities, and speculated about the nature of the virus. Some, like Ariel, had undergone dramatic physical changes. Others had developed psychic or elemental powers, and a few, like Mrs. Abernathy, seemed to have tapped into something darker and more primal. It was during one of these discussions that Ariel first heard the term evolved being used to describe themselves. The word spread quickly through the crowd, a new identity to rally around. They were no longer victims of a strange illness. They were the vanguard of a new stage in human development. As the festival began to wind down, Mayor Collins, still in his luminous form, called for attention once more. "My friends," he began, his voice carrying easily over the murmur of the crowd. "Tonight marks a new beginning for Pine Ridge. We stand at the threshold of a new era, one filled with both promise and peril.
The changes we have undergone are just the first step. Now, we must learn to harness our new abilities, to use them for the betterment of our community and, perhaps one day, the world." He paused, his glow dimming slightly. "But we must also be cautious. The outside world is not ready for what we have become. For now, we must keep our transformation a secret. Pine Ridge must become a sanctuary, a place where the evolved can learn and grow in safety." A ripple of agreement passed through the crowd. Ariel felt a mix of relief and apprehension at the mayor's words. On one hand, the idea of a safe haven was appealing. On the other, the thought of cutting themselves off from the rest of the world felt wrong somehow.
As the meeting dispersed, Ariel found herself walking home with the Andersons. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wood smoke. They walked in companionable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. It was Linda who finally broke the silence. "So, what do you think about all this evolved business?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. Ariel considered the question. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me is excited about the possibilities, but another part is scared. We're changing so much, so quickly. What if we lose our humanity in the process?" John nodded thoughtfully. "It's a valid concern. But maybe being human isn't about our physical form or even our abilities. Maybe it's about our capacity for love, for compassion, for growth. And from what I've seen tonight, those things are still very much a part of who we are, evolved or not." As they reached the Andersons' house, Ariel paused. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. I don't know how I would have gotten through all this without you." Linda pulled her into a warm hug. "You're family now, remember? We're in this together." As Ariel walked the short distance to her own home, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face them alone. The next few weeks saw Pine Ridge transform into a hidden utopia of sorts. Under Mayor Collins's leadership, the town established new protocols to help the evolved control and develop their abilities. The old community center became a training ground, with those who had mastered their powers teaching others. Ariel threw herself into this new role with gusto. Her unique experience of undergoing such a dramatic transformation made her an ideal mentor for those struggling to adapt to their changes. She worked tirelessly, helping others come to terms with their new identities and abilities. But as the evolved population of Pine Ridge grew more confident and powerful, new challenges arose. There were debates about how to use their abilities responsibly, concerns about maintaining secrecy, and the ever-present worry about what would happen if the outside world discovered their existence. It was during one of these town meetings that the first real test of their new society came. A young man named Derek, who had developed the ability to control electricity, stood up with a radical proposal. "Why are we hiding?" he demanded, sparks literally flying from his fingertips. "We have these incredible powers. We should be out there showing the world what we can do. We could solve the energy crisis, stop natural disasters, and wars." His words were met with a mix of cheers and worried murmurs. Ariel could see the appeal of his argument, but she also recognized the danger. Mayor Collins stepped forward, his luminous form dimming slightly in what Ariel had come to recognize as a sign of concern. "I understand your enthusiasm, Derek, but we must be cautious. The world isn't ready for us yet. If we reveal ourselves too soon, we risk being seen as a threat." Derek scoffed, his eyes flashing with electric blue light. "A threat? We're the next step in human evolution. They should be in awe of us, not afraid." The meeting devolved into heated debate. Ariel watched with growing unease as the town seemed to split into factions, those who wanted to reveal themselves to the world and those who favored continued secrecy. As the argument reached a fever pitch, Ariel felt something shift within her. A new power stirred, one she hadn't realized she possessed. Without fully understanding what she was doing, she stood and raised her hands. A wave of calm washed over the room. The angry voices died down, replaced by looks of confusion and then serenity. Ariel realized with a start that she was somehow projecting her emotions, influencing the mood of those around her. In the sudden quiet, she found her voice. "Listen to me, all of you," she said, her words carrying a weight she'd never felt before. "I understand both sides of this argument. We have been given incredible gifts, and it's natural to want to use them to help the world, but we have to be smart about this." She paused, looking around the room. Every eye was on her, hanging on her words. "We're still learning about our abilities, still figuring out what it means to be evolved. If we reveal ourselves now, we risk causing panic. Worse, we could be seen as a threat to be controlled or eliminated. Derek opened his mouth to argue, but Ariel held up a hand. That doesn't mean we do nothing. We can find ways to use our abilities to help people without revealing what we are. We can be the silent guardians, the unseen helpers, and when the time is right, when we're ready and the world is ready, then we can step into the light. As she finished speaking, Ariel felt the energy she had been projecting fade. The room remained quiet for a moment, then erupted into applause. Even Derek nodded reluctantly, the sparks at his fingertips dying down. Mayor Collins approached Ariel, a look of pride and something like relief on his glowing face. "Thank you," he said softly. "You may have just prevented a disaster." In the days that followed, Pine Ridge settled into a new rhythm. The Evolved continued to train and develop their abilities, but now with a renewed sense of purpose. They found subtle ways to use their powers for good, preventing accidents before they happened, subtly influencing crops to grow better, quietly healing the sick. Ariel's role in the community grew. Her ability to project emotions made her an invaluable mediator, helping to smooth over conflicts and maintain harmony. She also continued to mentor newly changed individuals, helping them navigate the physical and emotional challenges of their transformations. But even as Pine Ridge flourished, Ariel couldn't shake the feeling that their isolation couldn't last forever. The outside world was changing too, in its own way. News reports spoke of unexplained phenomena occurring across the globe. Were there others like them out there? And if so, what did it mean for the future? As summer faded into autumn, bringing with it a riot of color to the surrounding forests, Ariel found herself standing at the edge of town, looking out at the world beyond. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Bennett, the woodworker, to Ariel, the evolved leader, the wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it the promise of change. Whatever the future held, Ariel knew that Pine Ridge would face it together. They had become more than a community. They were a family, bound by shared experience and the incredible potential of what they had become. As she turned back toward the town, Ariel smiled. The virus had changed them, yes, but in many ways it had also made them more human than ever before, and that, she realized, was the true gift they had been given. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.